Have you noticed how every conversation seems to revolve around generational stereotypes? Baby boomers get blamed for economic collapse. Millennials supposedly ruined entire industries. Gen Z is labeled screen-obsessed and distracted. But wedged quietly between those loud narratives sits a group that rarely gets discussed: Generation X. Born roughly between 1965 and 1980, they're often invisible in the culture wars. They're the colleague who handles everything without announcing it. The parent who sacrificed quietly without asking for applause. The people who help construct the digital systems we all rely on, yet rarely overshare online themselves. And psychologically, they may be one of the most complex generations alive. What shaped them most? Independence at an early age. They were the latchkey kids, not as an exception, but as a norm. Imagine being 8 years old in the late 1970s. The school bus drops you off. You unlock the front door with a key hanging around your neck and walk into a silent house. No adult supervision. No instant communication. No devices to bridge the gap. You made a snack, turned on the television, and waited for evening. By the mid-1980s, millions of children were routinely unsupervised after school. That wasn't rare. It was cultural standard. And that environment sends a powerful psychological message: solve your own problems. When something went wrong, you couldn't text a parent. You couldn't search for instructions online. You made a decision and dealt with the consequences. Discipline, when it arrived, was straightforward and final. There weren't prolonged emotional negotiations. You learned quickly that actions led directly to outcomes. Psychologists describe this as a high-contingency environment, where cause and effect are tightly linked. Growing up in that atmosphere trains the brain to anticipate consequences. It encourages scanning for risk. That's why many Gen Zers seem to predict trouble before it unfolds. It isn't pessimism. It's mental rehearsal built from necessity. But independence wasn't the only influence. They also witnessed a major cultural shift. They heard lectures about loyalty, commitment, and moral consistency, then watched divorce rates surge. They saw parents dedicate decades to companies only to be laid off without warning. Institutions that promised stability proved fragile. The lesson absorbed early was simple: security is conditional. That mindset evolved into what psychologists call defensive pessimism. Expect good outcomes, perhaps, but prepare thoroughly for the worst. It's not chronic negativity. It's pattern recognition formed through repeated disappointment. Over time, that caution can look like emotional detachment. In reality, it's protective layering. This guarded approach also explains their complicated relationship with visibility. They grew up in an era when embarrassment faded quickly. A bad haircut or awkward mistake didn't become permanent public record. Privacy was assumed. So broadcasting every detail of life online feels unnatural to many of them. Not because they lack technical knowledge, they helped build the internet, but because exposure feels risky. They observe, they scroll, but they rarely overshare. To them, discretion equals safety. Another defining trait is their reliance on irony. Emotional restraint often hides behind humor. Nothing is treated too seriously for long. This habit formed partly under the shadow of global tension. During the Cold War, children practiced nuclear drills in classrooms. Adults delivered reassurances while simultaneously preparing for catastrophe. Living inside that contradiction teaches you to cope through distance. Laughter becomes insulation. Yet despite instability and mixed signals, Gen X developed a formidable work ethic. Many started working young, delivering newspapers at dawn, bagging groceries, managing cash registers without digital assistance. These weren't resumed strategies. They were early lessons in responsibility. Watching corporations lay off loyal employees taught them not to trust systems blindly. Instead of betting on institutional security, they focused on personal competence. They may not romanticize hustle culture, but they value capability. If loyalty won't protect you, skill might. So they make themselves useful, quietly. Indispensable without self-promotion. There's a paradox at their core. They are fiercely self-reliant, yet deeply dependable. Asking for help can feel uncomfortable. Offering help feels automatic. When parents were absent, friendships filled the gap. Loyalty was forged horizontally rather than hierarchically. That bond persists. Authority, for Gen X, is earned, not assumed. Titles alone don't command respect. Competence does. If a leader demonstrates genuine skill, they'll commit wholeheartedly. But empty authority triggers skepticism. Historical events reinforced this distrust: political scandals, mishandled crises, economic volatility. They internalized early that power structures are imperfect. Financially, they endured repeated shocks. Recessions hit different segments of the cohort at different life stages. Market crashes disrupted stability just as many were gaining footing. That repeated instability fostered diversification instincts. Multiple income streams aren't always ambition-driven. They're defense mechanisms. This survival orientation carries psychological weight. Research suggests Gen X is less likely to seek social support during stress, not because they lack relationships, but because vulnerability feels unfamiliar. Handling things alone became default programming. In crisis, they're steady. In intimacy, they can struggle to open fully. Their relationship with knowledge also differs from younger generations. Before search engines, information required effort. Hours in libraries, physical card catalogs, manual research. When learning demands energy, it imprints more deeply. That process cultivated patience and retention. They also developed hands-on problem-solving skills. When something broke, you tried to fix it. You experimented. You adjusted. This fostered a mechanical confidence, a belief that most challenges could be addressed through persistence and resourcefulness. Now many of them are parenting within an entirely different environment, one filled with constant monitoring, digital documentation, and instant answers. Having grown up with limited oversight, they often provide more presence to their children than they themselves received. Yet some quietly worry about overprotection. In their worldview, visibility increases risk. Ultimately, Gen X occupies a transitional space in modern history. They remember life before permanent connectivity. They experienced boredom without immediate relief. They solved problems without digital shortcuts. They matured as the old analog world dissolved and the digital era solidified. They are not superior to other generations. They are shaped by timing. Positioned between cultural eras, they serve as a bridge, connecting past frameworks to present systems. Bridges rarely receive celebration. They exist to support movement between two sides, and that understated function may define them best. They don't demand recognition. They don't chase constant validation. They complete the task and move on. If no one notices, that's fine. In many ways, that quiet competence, steady, skeptical, self-sufficient, is the clearest psychological signature of Generation X.